there goes class. Oh, man. I can tell. My bro, that my homie, Count Money. That on God, man, you want no smoke. No smoke, no smoke. You don't want it. Can't go, won't go. Either money. Smoke, no smoke. No smoke, no smoke.
Hello, everybody.
No smoke, no smoke.
We give people just a little bit more time to show up because we should have more than this. Quite a few more. Where are my people?
No smoke, no smoke.
Okay.
No
All
smoke.
right, there's two more people in. Okay. Let's go ahead. I think we're there. Her bell work? you have to go past the gerrymandering questions. And the Jan 7, what is my position? What is my problem with the Duggars? The Duggars, and this is the family from the show 19 Kids and Counting. The show was canceled about 5 years ago, so if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I do understand. All right, I do understand that you may not be familiar with the show. It hasn't been on TV, and plus you guys have probably grown up without really watching TV for much. Is anybody familiar with the show 19 Kids and Counting, the Duggars? And if you're wondering, this picture below is the Duggar family. We've got Jim Bob and we've got Michelle. Those are the parents, and everyone else is their child, biological. They adopted none of them. They adopted none of them. This is not a mixed family. This is, they got married and they started having kids, and they didn't stop until 19. They had a show on TLC for many, many years. Started off as 17 Kids and Counting. Then, for obvious reasons, it became 18 Kids and Counting, and then it became 19 Kids and Counting. Before their show, they had several specials on TLC, where they would spend like 2 hours with the Duggars. Before they had a show, a weekly show, they had these specials, and that's when I became familiar with them. Okay, so we're not really familiar with who the Duggars are, but that's okay. We're starting to get to that point where people aren't really recognizing them. But they were a big, they were a big thing for a little while. But I really have pretty significant issues with this family, with the fact that they had, not with the family, what they represent. And the fact that they have been, been allowed to promote their family, I have issues with it, right? So I'm going to go into why. And you may wonder, what in the heck am I talking about a show in environmental science does have to do? But it really does. This absolutely has to do with our unit. This bell work is 100% is very much tied to our unit, and I'm going to explain to you how and why. So I became familiar with them with the specials that would happen before they ever had a show. But I think the first special was like 14 Kids and Counting and stuff like that, in which they would just spend a couple hours, interviewing them, watching them at their home, seeing what they do, because this was, I guess, it was fascinating. So I watched a couple of the specials. My wife would watch them, and this was before streaming services, so really the TV was your entertainment. So I find myself watching them too. My first thought when I saw these Duggars was, it was very, what you would expect a science teacher like me to say. That's ecologically irresponsible, right? That is, I have an issue with them having so many kids because the world can't handle huge American families, right? It's bad enough we have huge families in really, really poor regions, but the world really can't handle very large American families. We use too many resources. We are too destructive to our world environment. America really needs to have a very low population growth, or else the world's in real trouble. And this is a family promoting the idea of very large families, and that I was personally just, that's not okay. That's not going to be okay with me. So that was my first initial problem. But even in that first episode, I'm like, there's something wrong here. There's something something about this leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't really know what it is. But so you watch the Duggars, and of course the first question they have to answer from any sort of interviewer is, why do you have so many kids? right? How did you come to the decision that you would have so many kids? And their answer is always, when we got married, we decided we would have as many children as Jesus would bless us with. Okay? That's always their stock answer. We decided we would have as many children as Jesus chose to bless us with. All right, so that's kind of a little bit of a, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but okay. People have religious views, gotta respect that, right? Next, you start to learn the kids' names. Well, there's Josh and John, Josiah, Jeremiah, Joseph. I don't really know their names, but I don't really know their names personally, but I know these are the names: Jeffrey, Jeremiah, Josiah, Joseph, Joe, John, Jenna, Jill, Jennifer, some other, it comes hard to come up with names, but why are they, what's so interesting about those names? What did you notice?
They all start with a G.
They all start with J. J for Jesus. Okay. They all start with J. J for Jesus. Again, they're religious. Got it. Understand. That's not a choice I would make, but that's a choice they make. Okay. Yeah, you're fine. Anyway, so you learn their names. Okay, well, and of course it's always like, well, how do you handle such a large family and you get into school and whatnot? And they look up and that's when you learn, but they don't go to school. Every single child is homeschooled. They are all schooled at home. Okay, they are all homeschooled. Right there, warning lights are flashing in my head. All right, because when you see a large family that's all homeschooled, you're starting to get into, those are some warning signs, and I'll explain what it's a warning sign of in just a little bit. But yeah, I started to get these kind of, weird vibes. My wife was interested and fascinated by them, so she went to their website and read through some things, and they answered some questions on there. One of them was let's take a look here. Let me before I get into that, let me start showing you some pictures of the Duggars, right? I want you to pay attention to the girls and how they are dressed. In every single picture, you will notice something about the girls and how they are dressed. There's something that holds true in every picture you see of this family. How are these girls dressed? What stands out? What do you notice? What do you see? Not the colors, dresses. Thank you. Every single time you see a girl, she's in a dress or a skirt. You never see a girl wearing pants. They don't in the Duggar families. They don't have pants, right? The little girls may be wearing leggings or pants on under their dress, and that's to stop them from being a little girl and exposing themselves by hanging upside down or something like that, right? But once they get to an age where they can be trusted to not accidentally expose themselves, there's no pants anymore. It's only dresses, right? It's only dresses. And when asked about this, they would reply that they dress modestly, right? They believe in modest apparel. So that means girls wear dresses. Boys wear slacks and pants, girls wear dresses, right? Modest apparel. And so again, back to the website, my wife was on there, and someone asked, well, if you guys go to the beach or to a swimming pool, how do you stay modestly dressed? And so the Duggars provided a link to the website that they use to get their swimming clothes for the girls. You know what modest swimwear is? A dress. A full dress. And we're not talking a skirt. We're talking a full dress, right? With shoulders covered, because that's modest. All the way, dresses down to knee at the least, most likely down to the ankles. So modest swimwear is a dress, right? Which is, again, warning lights flashing all over my map here. And my final, the thing that finally showed me, okay, yeah, this is definitely what I think it is one of the early specials. Now, when they did the show, they kind of got real good at kind of hiding some aspects of their life. But in these early specials, they were a lot more open. So in one of the early specials, you can see them as, they go to the store. First off, you got to ask yourself, how do they do it? How do they even get groceries? Jim Bob works, Michelle doesn't, because you can't work if you have 19 kids. You just can't. You can't. So they show them going to the grocery stores, and the weird thing about it was they stay as a group wherever they go. It's like a swarm of bees. They do not split up. It's never, okay, we're at the grocery store, hey, you three go over here and get that. No, everybody moves as a family group, all smiling, all polite as you could ever ask, right? They're always smiling, always happy, always polite, but they're always in a group. So they're always together in the house, and whenever they go out, they're always in a group, not really free to be with other people. And then so the question arises, so then finally one episode, one of the specials early, they showed them, the whole family going to a convention, right? They didn't say what the convention was for, what the convention was called. They just went to a convention. And this convention was a convention full of huge families. Every single person in this convention was part of a 15, 16, 17 person family, right? Every family was very, very large. And at this convention, that's when the kids were allowed to mingle and be with other kids. But only there. You don't see them going out and playing with other kids anywhere else. Only at this convention where there's huge families. And on the show and otherwise, you would sometimes see the kids playing with friends from other families, but they were always really large families. It was right then I knew they must be in some sort of a cult. This must be some sort of a cult. Elijah, you called it, right? You can kind of look at it. You can see this is some sort of a cult, right? And it turns out they deny it, but there's really no denying it. They belong to a cult, a very fundamentalist religious cult. And when asked, what's your denomination? What do you believe? They say, we're Christians. Yeah, but are you Baptist? Are you Presbyterian? What kind of? They're like, no, we're Christians, right? They never belong to any specific church because they belong to a movement. And I'm gonna type it here for you, known as the Quiverful movement. The Quiverful movement. They deny it, right? And maybe they don't believe they are, but whatever they follow is just another name for Quiverful. The Quiverful movement. I've heard of that. Cool. To understand this name, you've got to kind of understand. First off, what's a quiver? Right, so quiver is a noun and a verb. The verb quiver is to shake. What is a quiver, the noun? Anybody know? What's a quiver? Okay. Well, I guess nobody knows, and that's okay. You're not really supposed to know. I mean, you can if you I don't know, get into D&D fantasy stuff like that. A quiver is a round case that you put arrows into. It is what holds arrows. So if you have a bow and you have this container with a whole bunch of arrows in it that you strap on your back, you pull an arrow out of it, you're pulling the arrow out of the quiver, and then you're launching your arrows. Okay? So a quiver is a container full for your arrows. Where this name comes from, the Quiverful movement, it comes from a line in the Bible. I believe it's in Luke. I don't know the exact line, but the line, it has in it, and each child shall be as an arrow to fire at the non-believers. So the quiverful movement is a movement to have a quiver full of arrows to fire at the non-believers. And these arrows in this metaphor are children. So a quiverful family has a lot of children, so their quiver is full. What are they firing? What do they mean by non-believers? What do they mean here? To understand the quiverful movement, we've got to go back to 1974. So this country has always had, fundamentalist religious movements in it. This is one of them. This movement may have started before 1974, but it really took off in 1974. Took off for, a small cult, but took off in 1974 with Roe versus Wade. If you are familiar with Roe versus Wade, you'll know that this is the landmark Supreme Court decision that made abortion legal in the United States during the first trimester. Before this decision, whether or not abortions were legal was a state-by-state decision. So most states, abortion was illegal. Didn't matter, what time of the pregnancy, it just was illegal. Roe versus Wade said every state in the United States must allow legal abortions for a woman during the first trimester. No reason given, no reason asked. A woman must have access not have one, but must have access to abortion services. And Roe versus Wade is what made this. Now, this decision made a lot of fundamentalists, Christians, very, very angry. And they're still angry. I mean, it's still a major voting point for the fundamentalist community that abortion be outlawed, right? And so when the Supreme Court looked up and said, no, abortion needs to be legal for any woman for any reason during the first trimester, after the first trimester, that's no longer the case, but during the first trimester, abortion must be made legal, that made a lot of people really mad, really angry, right? So people in the quiverful movement and other movements looked up and tried to fight it. They immediately called their congressmen, their senators, the president, vice president. They tried to talk to anybody who's supposed to represent them to say, we're not okay with this, fix this. And they couldn't get anywhere. They tried legal challenges, and they couldn't get anywhere. So they tried through the system to overturn Roe versus Wade, but they couldn't. And the quiverful movement, at least, made the decision then that, okay, we can't win through the Democrat, because we live in a democracy, and their opinion is very much the minority. So because our opinion is the minority, we can't have our beliefs respected. We can't have our beliefs be, the laws of the land. They decided they would take another strategy. And they would take what they would do is if they're a minority now, they would play a long game. They would say, okay, maybe we're the minority now, but if we make a decision now to have as many children as we possibly can, and we raise these children to believe what we believe and have as many children as they possibly can, then in 100 years or so, we may not be the minority. There will be regions where we have outbred the non-believers, and therefore, if we are the majority, our beliefs become the governing rules of our city, our state, and maybe eventually of the United States. So that's the game plan for the quiverful movement. The idea is we will simply outbreed the non-believers. We will outbreed those who think differently from us. And that is the goal of the quiverful movement. But it is a very fundamentalist movement, very literal biblical movement. So let's talk about a few tenets, a few beliefs of the quiverful movement. And I honestly, when you start looking at the Duggars from the viewpoint of an extreme fundamentalist religious cult, then a lot of things about them make sense. Of course they don't go to school. Right? You're not going to let your kids go to school. What's going to happen to these kids when they go to school? What's going to happen? Your kids are going to get exposed to other opinions. You're getting exposed to other beliefs, and that is not okay. That is not going to work for the Quiverful movement, right? You have to keep them away from other opinions. They must be kept away from other beliefs. You know, you can't send your kids off to make friends with non-Quiverful kids, because then they may think, well, you know, I don't have to be this Quiverful thing, right? Well, we'll talk about that. What are they going to do when they grow up? We'll talk. We address that. Yeah, of course the kids have to be exposed to other opinions, other beliefs, other ideas. That's also why they're not allowed to socialize with other kids unless those kids are from the Quiverful movement, right? Because obviously these kids have to find spouses, but their spouses come from Quiverful families. Okay? Let's talk about how you date in the Duggar family. The Quiverful movement uses courtship. That's what they call it. Courting. You don't date, you court. So how this works is, you're one of the boys who has met somebody at a convention, right? You've met a friend in the family, someone at the convention. You met a girl and you want to court her. How you go about this is you go to your dad, because the father is the patriarch, and this is a biblical literist cult. They believe the Bible as, literate. The Bible is literally the Word of God, and the Bible, for whatever whether good or bad, was written by a patriarchal society. The people who wrote the Bible were very patriarchal. Who had the power in all dealings? It was the eldest man. It was the patriarch. So it's a very patriarchal society. So you're a boy, you want to date, you want to court, you go to your dad and say, Dad, I'd like to court this girl. Dad then decides if you can. Okay? If he says no, that's it. In the discussion, you're not dating her. That's you must obey your father. That's obey your father and mother. But if Dad says, okay, I'm gonna agree to let you court her, what happens next is your dad goes and talks to her dad to ask her dad if this can happen. They discuss it. If her dad says no, end of story, done, right? But if both patriarchs decide that this is a courtship that they will allow, you are allowed to court this girl. And so how you court is you go over to her house for a meal, right? So you go over to her family, a whole huge family meal. You are there to have a meal with them. And talk with them. You might not allow them to talk, but if you are, you must take a watcher. And a watcher is a smaller sibling. Okay? It's a sibling usually between the age of 8 and 12. Because there's a developmental stage all kids go through where the rules are the rules and you must follow the rules. That is that 8 to 12-year-old range, right? Most kids go through this, you can't break the rules belief. So a kid around their age will be assigned to you as your watcher. And that child's job is to make sure you behave yourself with, you don't do anything else. So that means you're not allowed to kiss, because your first kiss must be during your wedding ceremony. That's when you can have your first kiss, during the wedding ceremony. All right. So this is very, very old school dating. Right? This is not, let's go to a movie. This is, everything happens through the family and the family only. And it's a very patriarchal society. And this is a Quiverful thing. One very core tenet of the Quiverful movement is that a woman cannot get into heaven on her own. They quote two areas in the Bible which seem to suggest this, but because of original sin, because Eve picked the fruit, a woman is not allowed into heaven except through her father or through her husband. Nothing a woman does, says, or believes will get her into heaven. The only way a woman can get into heaven because of original sin is to properly serve your dad and husband, to be dutiful, to be obedient, and to always, always, always defer to the patriarch, which is your father until you are married, and it becomes your husband after you are married. And this is a core tenet of the Quiverful movement. And this is taught to all the kids, right? And mind you, they're not going somewhere else and hearing something different. From the day you were born, right? From the day you were born, as a girl, you were taught, I must obey my father, and then my husband, or it's eternal damnation, right? This is what happens when you start dealing with the eternal soul, right? You'll swallow anything if it means not going to hell for eternity, right? So these girls and the boys are raised with this belief that the only way of your daughter or your wife, can get into heaven is by dutifully serving you, by being subservient and obedient to you, doing what she is told. Obviously, Michelle doesn't work, right? Michelle can't work. You can't have that many kids at work. And the kids, mind you, these kids, to have 19 kids, you're having a kid like every 12 to 16 months is what their age. There's a couple twins. There's like these two are twins, and I think there's a brother sister twin set. But overwhelmingly, these are single births, and so I think she birthed like 17 times, right? So in order to have, you can't work. You just can't work. And so, mind you, when you have a new kid, and the kids are spread apart like 9 to 12 months, that means you have like 2 other kids in the house that are still in diapers. How does Michelle do that? How can Michelle handle that on her own? Well, like we've already seen, she really doesn't. Right? Babysitters. Well, you don't need babysitters. Who is your babysitter? Who becomes the eldest what takes care of them? This is important. Nope. The eldest daughter. The eldest girl child. When a new baby comes along, and it's really not the eldest girl child, it's the next one in line, right? It's the next one, the eldest probably already has a baby that's effectively theirs. So the next one, new baby, this one that was just before the one I birthed, that's now yours, right? And it's your job. And from mom and dad's perspective, that makes sense, right? These girls have to learn how to take care of babies. That's going to be their job, and their only job. So they have to know how to take care of girls. They have to know how to take care of babies. They have to know how to keep the house, because that's going to be their job. That's it. That's what's available to them is mother and housemaker, right? So they better learn. They're going to have to learn now how to do that. Michelle's not raising all of these kids. These kids are raising kids, but in strict accordance to the family beliefs. We've got all these things kind of working here, and everyone typically looks up and says, wow, but they're happy. That's not the choice I would make. When people first see the diagrams, they're like, that's not the choice I would make. I would never want that many kids, but they're happy, so who am I to criticize, right? Who am I to say anything? These people are always happy. Look at them. They're always smiling. They are always smiling. You know why they're always smiling? Why they're always happy? Because another core tenet of the Quiverful movement is that to be anything but happy is to sin, right? To show anything but happiness is is a sin of pride. It is showing that you are not properly respecting your mother and father, right? And the Bible says, thou shalt respect your mother and father. So to show unhappiness shows that you are not properly respectful to your parents. So it is a sin to not have a smile on your face. It is a sin to act angry, to act sad. You have to be, as they say all the time, an ambassador for Christ. Right? Why are they always so smiley and so polite? Well, they have to be. It's a sin to do anything else. But notice they're not really contributing to our society. They're contributing to the society they want. This is an important thing. They're contributing to the society they want. So these kids all are homeschooled, and one thing that kind of showed up in the show and people started to take notice was when Josh, the eldest son, reached 18. The family all had a discussion. Josh, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to study? And he went off to college. When the next eldest boy got to 18, they all had this big discussion. Where are you going to go to college? What are you going to do? What's going to be your job? And he went off to college. When the eldest girl turned 18, no discussion of that was ever had. She got married and she left home. When the next girl got 18, and you know, when they were in high school, no discussion was ever had about, you know, where are you going to go to college. It was never even brought up. It was never even shown or expected that they were ever going to do anything beyond high school. They simply got married and left the house, right? And people noticed this, and they started writing to the show. They're like, this isn't right. You are fully making every expectation in your house that the boys are going to go to college and the girls are not, and you're not even allowing the girls the opportunity for education past high school. So the Duggars eventually conceded to let their daughters attend university online. So they stayed in the home, right? The girls weren't allowed to leave. The girls stayed in the home while they took online courses from a university which doesn't exist anymore because they lost their accreditation. The university was basically a quiverful university. They studied. One of them studied midwifery, right, childbirth. One of them studied family practices. One of them studied elementary education, right? So they were allowed to go to school, but only online and only to learn skills that are home skills, that are house skills. The boys were allowed to go learn a trade and a job. The girls were allowed to learn how to be a mom and a wife. I mean, this is the Duggar family. This is the quiverful movement. So ultimately, and this is what my distaste for the Duggars cemented it into. You know, why? What is my issue with them? Why can't I just let them be? And you know, I can't. Obviously, I have this discussion with you guys, but you know, it's still their choice, their life. They can lead it. But my biggest issue with this movement is that this is a movement aimed at disempowering women, aimed at undoing all the steps that women have had to fight so hard for over the past 300 years to achieve. This movement seeks to undo it. And what have we talked about when it comes to getting a handle on the population growth? How are we going to stop this uncontrolled population growth? Well, empowering women is the only way to do it, right? To give women power over their own decisions, over their own lives, is the only way to cut down on population growth. This is a movement aimed at disempowering women, at taking that power away from women, at raising them to believe they don't have any power. And they are raised to believe they have no powers. They have no decision-making ability. They aren't going to work and earn money. They aren't going to say no to their husband for fear of eternal damnation. Right? And the boys are trained, are brought up to have all the power, to believe that yes, you must be kind, you must be all this stuff, but ultimately your decision is the decision that matters. You have the power, and you must have as many kids as possible, right? So my biggest issue, what is taught? What have I taught you? If a woman can have a job, and this is something we kind of got to understand. If you're a woman in a marriage with no income of your own, no way to earn money, no skill, how do you leave that marriage? Right? How do you leave that marriage? Especially if you come from a family that says divorce is an unforgivable sin. You can't go back home. They don't want you because your place isn't back in with the family. Your place is with your husband. That's your duty, your God-given duty. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. You're married. You don't have the right. And if you don't have any money, where can you go? Right? So this is a movement that says no women. You shouldn't have a job. Your job's going to be a mom. Right? That's what God wants for you. That's what Jesus has planned for you. You can't have a job. That's going to be your husband's job. God created man and woman. He didn't create the same thing. God created man for his job. Your job is mother. That sort of stuff. So these kids are being raised, these girls are being raised to not have any prospects. These girls are being raised to not believe that they have power. These girls are being raised to not believe that they deserve education or skills beyond being a mother, beyond being a wife. And the boys are being trained the same thing. So, how else do you help control population growth? You educate girls. And these girls are not being educated, not the same as the boy, because they don't need it. To their viewpoint of the queerful movement, what does a girl need to go to college for? She doesn't need to. She's going to be a mother. You don't need to have an advanced skill. That's for the husband. That's for the patriarch. So ultimately, my issue with the Duggars is it's not them particularly. It's the fact that they represent a movement in this country to disempower women. And before we look up and say, well, that's never going to catch on, please understand that these rights that, and you girls have lived your whole life with the right to vote, to have a job, to get educated, to be a part, to make your own decisions. Guys, this is a new thing. It's only been since 1918 that women could vote in this country. Until 1918, it was illegal for a woman to try to vote. Before World War II, you were practically not allowed to have a job as a woman after you got married. You could have a job before you got married, but after you were married, it was expected and darn near demanded that you would quit your job to become wife. Right? Getting married meant you were no longer employed. I have a handbook. It's a kind of a famous handbook that's been printed many times from 1913. I want to say it was New Hampshire, for teachers, female teachers in New Hampshire. And one of the first things it says is when you are married, your employment is terminated. Right? So you could not be a teacher and be married. And also, along with if you are seen in public with a male who is not your father or brother, you will be terminated. Your employment will be terminated. But I'm just saying that this is less than, this is just barely 100 years ago where women, if they got married, would lose their job as a teacher. And that's a female job. That's always been a relatively female job. So, but they would lose it if they got married. And it only changed after World War II because during World War II, all the men went to fight and the women had to go to work, right? And that same thing happened in World War I, but we were in World War I so short of a time that when the men came back, they basically just booted all the women out of their jobs and life went back to how it had been. But once World War II came around, women had worked so long that they kind of just basically looked up and said, "No, we're not leaving our jobs," many of them did, but they from that point on, it kind of became accepted that a woman could be married and have a job. But that's still, we're talking 60, 80 years that a woman's been allowed to have a job after marriage. These rights we think are just because we've lived with them. I've lived with them. It's been this way during my whole life. But you only have to go back a few generations to find that's not the case. So these rights that we take for granted, that we assume are just inalienable, that are just a given, they're not, and they can be taken away. I'm willing to put money on the fact that within the next 4 years, abortion, Roe versus Wade, will effectively be overturned. The rule that says a woman must be allowed to have an abortion during the first trimester if she wants it will be gone. Our Supreme Court will almost certainly hear a case and decide that no, they're going to let the states decide whether it's legal or not. I put money on it right now that within the next 4 years, abortion will not become illegal federally, but at the state level, it will become illegal. It will become illegal in almost every state. California, it'll still be legal. New York, it'll still be legal. But I can assure you, Florida will go illegal. All the South will go illegal. Let's be honest here. We'll make abortions illegal, just flat out. So, that's a right. That's a reproductive right that women, it's not a guarantee. Right? It's not a guarantee. We don't force men. Men don't have babies, but we don't force men to be fathers. But we do force, if abortions become illegal, you, by biology, are now forced to be a mother, whether you wanted to or not, right? And that's a right, that's a reproductive right that will most likely be taken away from us in the future. And yes, of course, just like we saw with, people in India, the idea that you should use birth control or not, that's not okay, right? Not the quiverful movements, no. Jesus blesses you with those children. Are you going to stand in the way? Are you going to go against what Jesus wishes? Jesus wants you to have children, right? So you certainly had better never use birth control because that would be denying Jesus, right? So, and if these things, if the quiverful movement is successful, and it's not ever going to be successful in our lives, it's probably never going to be successful regardless, but if these kind of movements become successful, these rights that women think are, The Handmaid's Tale is a show that's on Amazon Prime. You've probably never seen it, but if you get a chance to watch it, it's the basic idea of The Handmaid's Tale is that this sort of stuff has happened. The absolute most fundamentalist religious people have taken control. Yeah. So, anyways, and that kind of is the vision. It's a dystopian vision of the quiverful movement, but the Handmaid's Tale kind of is the vision of the quiverful movement. So let's see what else. Oh, someone asked me what happens when they get out of the house. Okay, what happens when they get out of the house and they become exposed to new ideas, or how can they not be exposed? There's the internet. That's another question. They are allowed to get on the internet at home in computers that are in the high traffic dining room area, and these computers have every safe surf program on there that will stop you from getting to a bad site, hopefully. But also, if you're on the computer, you must have a watcher watching what you're doing on the computer. Therefore, if you go somewhere you're not supposed to, that watcher will go straight to mom or dad telling you. So yeah, no, they really aren't allowed to use the internet for anything that might expose them to other opinions. But then the question is, sure, they are going to leave the home. And at that point in time, there's no doubt that they will be exposed to other ideas. But you're ignoring how profound an effect your upbringing has upon you. These are kids who are raised with no other information that as the absolute truth after being told for 18 years that if you mess up, if you go and do something other than what we've taught you, you're going to hell, right? For eternity, burn in hell for eternity. Don't discount how powerful that is to shape who you become. So they get out of the house and they get exposed to all this, but they're already buttressed. They're already immune to it because they've been raised to believe that this is the only path. Everybody else is on the sinful path to hell. I'm going to go to heaven as long as I continue to believe what I've been told to believe for 18 years. Right? I think with 19 kids, it's inevitable that one of them is going to break away and just go crazy. But the vast majority of them are going to do exactly as they've been trained to do. And you can already see that in some of these later photographs of the family. Let me share this one with you. This one right here, I know it's kind of a small, picture. Maybe have it a little bit bigger here. It's still not very big. Regardless, you see here, you see the Duggars. Notice kid, little kid. Here's a little kid. Another little kid over here. These are Duggars. These are Duggars' children. Right? The oldest Duggars have already left the home, gotten married, and started having kids because that's what they've been trained to do. They're eternal souls. So yeah, I mean, take it for what it is. I know I just ranted at you guys for like 50 minutes, but and I'm not trying to disparage religious beliefs. Please believe me, I'm not trying to disparage religious beliefs. I'm trying to show that there are groups out there that seek to undo the strides forward that women have made, right? And these groups aren't just men, right? These groups are females too. And we need to be on the watch for that because this is not going to help anybody, right? This idea that women are brood cows, that women are to have children and only children, right? Just so you know, you look at Michelle. She's usually seated, right? She's usually seated. You look at her here in this picture. She kind of is standing weird. You watch the show, you don't see her moving around very much. Here's the deal, and I have no evidence to prove this, but I'm pretty darn sure she uses a walker and that she has a real hard time standing because biologically, when you get pregnant as a woman during your pregnancy, your hips become very, very flexible. They kind of detach, your two hip bones detach from your backbone so that a child can pass through the birth canal. Well, it takes 5 years for your hips to finally go back to normal after the birth of that child. And if you have child after child after child after child, you end up with hip dysplasia, and you end up very, very unstable. And using your hips to bear your weight becomes very painful. So, yeah, I can assure you she uses a walker when the cameras aren't on her. I can also assure you that she can't hold her urine. I can assure you that because that's one thing that comes along with childbirth, especially multiple childbirths, is that women have a harder and harder time holding their urine. It's just biology. Sorry, guys. All right, so that is the end of class. My bell has rung, so I'm about to let you guys go. Hope you enjoyed the day, learned something maybe. Have a good day. Tomorrow we will start on our notes. Okay. Enjoy your lunch. Bye, guys.
Leave my head on